Hi, I'm Andrea Deer with the Whole Kit and Caboodle. Today's question is from Madge in Wetumpka, Alabama. Madge states, I have almost all of the powder puff inks, but never truly have gotten the concept of inking die cuts. I would love to see your process and hear your tips and techniques. You know, this was the #1 question when we threw out there, hey, what would you like to see us give some little tips and tricks on? We've had so many questions that we've decided we're going to divide this into 3 different videos. So this first one here, we're just going to go over the basics, how to choose your color and the very, very basic techniques on inking your die cuts with those Quick Quotes powder puff inks. Second in the series, we're going to dive deeper and go a little more intermediate on inking those really intricate die cuts such as letters, and as well as how do you store your chalking inks. And lastly, we're going to go really advanced in our techniques. We are going to show you how to erase mistakes, and we're going to show you what else you can do with all of these Quick Quotes powder puff chalking inks. So for now, let's hop over to the desk. Let's dive in. Let me show you the basics on using Quick Quotes powder puff inks in your die cutting projects. Quick Quotes powder puff inks are very different than stamping inks. While you can use these for stamping, what they're best at is giving a really soft hue of additional color to your project. In this case, we're going to use them on our die cut, our bunch of grapes here. So when you start, it's always, well, what color should I use? So if we wanted to ink these circles here and our leaf, what color would we start by using with our Quick Quotes powder puff inks? As a general rule of thumb, I always say that your ink pad should be about 2 shades darker than your paper that you're inking. A couple reasons. We want to be able to ensure that it stands out so that you can see it once you've inked it. And also know that with the chalking inks, they are going to dry just a shade lighter. So if we start a couple shades darker, know that that will absorb into the paper and be just a tad lighter once it dries. So if you look here, say we start with our leaf. So we have our leaf, and this is Parrot from My Colors cardstock. So if we wanted to ink our green leaf, we have a couple options here, right? So avocado is pretty dark. So if you see the 2 side by side, avocado could work. Or one of my favorites here, Fields of Green. Now you could use either of those colors. My choice would be Fields of Green because it's more of a primary green. And again, it's a couple shades darker than the cardstock that I'm going to ink. Now, if all you had in your stash was the avocado or perhaps Green with Envy, those are also going to work as well. There's no die-hard, fast rules. So just have fun with it. If you're ever unsure, you can always ink it on the flip side. That way you can see what it's going to look like on there if you're using a die cut from one of our kits. I tend to go with Fields of Green quite often. Green of Envy with Envy is also a great substitute. When you go to ink the piece, if you see how these ink pads are made, they're actually made so that your thumb will rest in that divot and that you can hold it with the round part with your fingers there, so that when you take off the lid, this is how they're made to be held. That's one of the reasons why they have that little divot. Now, I am, I guess, a rule breaker because I always tend to hold my ink pad like this, as do most people that I see when they're using these ink pads. But that was why they were originally designed that way, so that your thumb can go in that little divot. But what's also great about that divot is that it's good to get in those little crevices like we would have here on the leaf. Now, when you are inking, of course, we have our piece we're going to ink and we have our ink pad. I tend to go direct. I use the ink pad directly onto the die cut itself. Now, if you're a little scared to do that, you are welcome to use what we call daubers. So daubers come in all different sizes and shapes, but what this is you'll actually take the dauber, place it on the ink pad to get the ink, and then you'll use that to go across your edge like so. I suggest that you use a dauber when you have a brand new ink pad because they are so wet at first. That helps provide a little bit of a buffer of using that brand new wet ink pad, so it would transfer onto the dauber and then onto your die cut. Now mine are well worn, well loved. I use them on a daily basis. So I'm gonna go direct from my ink pad to my die cut. Now, if we want just the very edge of the die cut, we would want to hold our pad vertically and go just on the edge. So if you're only wanting the edge, we want to make sure that ink pad is being held directly up and down. Now, I really want to go part way in on that surface as well. So I'm going to take my ink pad and I'm going to hold it at just a little bit of an angle. And I am going to go direct from the ink pad onto the die cut. Again, I'm holding it at a little bit of an angle so that it doesn't only get the edge, it goes into that die cut just a little bit. So I'm going to ink just the top here. You want to use a really gentle pressure, because you can always go back and make it darker, but of course it's hard to take it away, right? There is a way to quote unquote erase, and we'll talk about that in a future video. But for this process, I would start really, really light with your pressure. So if I hold this up here, you can see the portion that we have inked and see what a difference that makes. Now, it might look really stark right now, but remember what I said, even though it's this dark now, it will dry just a shade lighter. So it will be just a tad lighter once it dries, and that's gonna be the perfect color. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go around this entire petal here. Now, I know that this petal has like a different all kinds of different spokes that go out. Truthfully, I don't worry a whole lot that it's, that we're going all the way in to every single little piece. So, I mean, it's okay, obviously, to get them, and to me, it's okay if you don't get them. So I am just going to gently go all the way around that die cut. My ink pads are, like I said, well loved, so I can do a little more pressure knowing that it's not extremely wet. But again, you want to use a lighter pressure the newer the ink pad is. So again, I'm just going to go all the way around it here. If there are some little crevices that you want to get into, that corner is perfect for that. So we'll just take that tip. Again, we're just using just slight pressure. We don't want to go too heavy with that pressure because then we're going to get a stamp from our pad, right? We don't want to see the harsh line. We just want to be fluid and soft with our motion. So I'm constantly moving it lightly all the way around. We never want to stamp or drag because that's going to create some really harsh lines. We want to be really soft and really fluid all the way around. Again, I'm not incredibly picky that it's exactly even all the way around, if we get every little nook and cranny, but that shows you there what that finished product would look like. So you can see that just nice little highlight all the way around that die cut there. So next I'm going to go ahead and do my circles of my grapes. Now, let me put the cover back on this ink pad. So for our grapes, we have a couple options. So palm tree would be good, right? So that's a good color selection there. We also have sour apple, that could be fun. We also have light moss. Now, if you look at light moss, it's almost identical in color to our circle. So it probably wouldn't show up very well. So if we follow my rule, palm tree would be the way to go. For the grapes, let's try something a little different just so you can see what a different use of color could be. So I'm going to go with sour apple here. So if you look at the ink pad, they are different in color, but not exactly 2 shades darker, right? So sometimes we want an effect that's a highlight and not necessarily a contour or a shadow or that kind of accent. We want something that's going to be a little brighter of an accent. And again, there's no hard, fast rule. Just use your best judgment. Play around on scrap pieces of paper so that you can see what these are going to look, all these colors would look like on that particular piece of cardstock. So again, I'm going to hold my ink pad at an angle, and I'm going to go all the way around that circle. So hold my ink pad at an angle very lightly. I'm going to continue moving that die cut, moving that die cut, moving that die cut until I have gone all the way around that circle. And I'm going to continue doing that here with all of these. Hold the ink pad at an angle, light touch. Remember, we can always go back and add more. It's way harder to take away once you've added it to the paper. So again, I'm going to go all the way around. All right, and I'm going to continue to do that on every single circle. I'm going to show you one more, and then we'll speed up the process to when all of the circles are done. Hold your ink pad at an angle. Lightly, we're going to go all the way around, because remember, if we hold it this way, it's only going to get the edge, and maybe there are times we want that effect, but I really want to go into that circle. You can always do more pressure on the edge, lighter pressure in the center. We want it to go darker on the edge and get lighter and lighter to our natural color of cardstock there. All right, so we'll speed this up and I will continue doing all of our circles until they're all complete. All right, so we have our last one here. Did you notice that as I was inking all of these circles, I continued to move my ink pad around? So sometimes I was using the top portion to do the inking, sometimes the left or right side, and sometimes the bottom. And I do that so that I can evenly use that ink pad. So if we always use the center section there, it will start to deteriorate quicker, and it'll dry in the middle here and still be wet on the end. So I like to constantly be changing the position of that ink pad so that I am distributing my pressure evenly onto the pad, as well as distributing all of that ink inside of there proportionately as well. All right, so now I have all of these inked. Now we could do something really fun and say we wanted to highlight just the edge a little bit darker. So if so, we could pull out our palm tree, because again, that was the great choice to begin with as well, because that those colors really blend well together, right? So in this one, our ink pad is darker than our cardstock. But here, if I hold it way more upright, right? So I'm near vertical with my ink pad. And I'm going to go all the way around just the edge. So we don't want to totally cover up what we just did, but look at the difference. So see how on this one here is the one we inked twice. So we have the really dark edge that goes softly into that next shade of green, which then transitions into our base of our cardstock there, that circle that we used to cut it from. So see the difference there? It's not dramatic, but it's just enough to be a fun effect. Really what I would suggest to do is just play around. So if you're scared to start doing that with directly onto the die cuts, get some scrap pieces of cardstock and just play. Use various pressures, use various levels of wetness of ink pads, various colors. Sometimes use the dauber, sometimes go direct, sometimes use the tip, sometimes use the curve edge. And I think the best way to really learn is just to consistently play around, because everyone's going to find the position of the pad. If you prefer a dauber, that's going to be a little different for everybody. So I think the more that you experiment with that, the better off you will be learning what works for you, because there are some people who use the ink pad this way. There are some people who will only use the daubers. So again, it's just personal preference. So I'm going to set all of these in place here so that we will be able to see what the finished product looks like when all is said and done. So I'll quickly go through and I'll just add all of these circles in place and we'll set it aside. All right, so as those are laid there, now can you really see the difference in the ones that I inked twice and the ones that I inked only once? So you can see that stark difference with that darker green of the palm tree on just those few. Actually, I think I might swap these out here. I think I like that placement better. So again, you just never know. Just keep playing around with all of those colors. And we're going to go ahead and put this on for our die cut. And of course, our green leaf here. Now we have one more piece that I want to show you about inking. So all of these pieces here have been from My Colors cardstock. We're using the Canvas collection and the Smooth collection. This particular one here is from the Glimmer collection. So when it comes to inking the Glimmer collection, be sure that you're going a little darker with your ink. You could go heavier with your running across there, of dabbing that onto the surface, or even go darker in color. And the reason is, once this paper is created, it goes back through a series of machines to add that shimmer coating on top. And that shimmer coating really absorbs ink differently than all of the other kinds of cardstock here. So when we see that Glimmer collection used for any of the die cuts, I would go just a little darker than you think you should. So in this case here, I'm going to go the Weeping Willow. So if I hold these up side by side, you see our leaf and our Weeping Willow, and that's a pretty dramatic color difference there. I'm going to go really light again with my techniques, because we can always go back and add more. It's way harder to take it away. So I'm going to go really light, and I'm going to go all the way around. I'm not too fussy about getting all the way that it's all perfect. I'm just going to go really, really light with my touch. Really light is the key. This is a newer ink pad, so it's pretty wet, so I'm going really light. Now, once I'm finished here, I can look at it to see if I want to add more. But see how that absorbs it differently? You would never think that that is that color, right? This looks so dark compared to this, but it's that shimmer that they add at the very end that it makes it absorb that color differently. All right, so then that would be all ready there to assemble. So if you take a look at the screen, I'm going to show you the one at the top is the one that we started. So this has not been inked at all compared to the bottom, and you can see what a difference the inking makes. Now the one at the top is perfectly fine, right? But just look at the dimension that we have added on that bottom die cut just by taking those 5-10 minutes and inking the edges of each separate piece. So hopefully you feel comfortable now just to give it a try. It's paper, right? Find some scraps, play around, feel the ink pad in your hand and see exactly what works for you. The key is remember to go light in pressure and to hold that ink pad at a slight angle. I think if you start with those basics, you'll be a pro in no time. But tune in for the next 2 weeks as we dive a little deeper into chalking inks, and we are going to give you some intermediate techniques, some tips on storage, as well as what else can this product do. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next week. Happy scrapping.